"Get out of my house!" she screamed. The little girl didn't cry. She didn't run. She just looked up with those enormous brown eyes and clutched the torn edge of her mother's apron. The maid, her mother, froze in absolute terror. Every single person in that hallway went completely silent. And then footsteps, slow, heavy footsteps coming from the top of the grand staircase. The billionaire was coming downstairs. He had heard everything, every single word. And what happened in the next 60 seconds changed the lives of everyone in that house forever. Hey, welcome back everyone. If you are new here, I am so glad you found this channel. Drop a comment right now and tell me where in the world are you watching from. I love seeing all your locations. And if you have not subscribed yet, please do it right now, because we tell stories here that will genuinely make you feel something real. Stay until the very end of today's story. I promise you the final twist is something I did not see coming myself. It will completely change how you feel about everything you just watched. All right, let's begin. Some houses look like paradise from the outside, but the people living inside them know the truth. The Harmon estate sat at the top of a long, winding private road, surrounded by perfectly trimmed hedges and iron gates that never seemed fully open. From the street, it looked like something out of a magazine. Every stone walls, a fountain in the circular driveway, floor-to-ceiling windows that caught the evening light and scattered it like gold across the garden. Inside, it smelled like fresh flowers and expensive cologne. And somewhere in the back of that mansion, in a small, warm kitchen that nobody important ever visited, a woman named Rosa hummed quietly to herself while she folded laundry. Rosa was 31 years old, dark hair always pulled back, hands always busy, as always a little tired. She had worked in a Harmonate for 4 years. 4 years of waking before sunrise. 4 years of polishing floors that other people walked across without looking down. 4 years of being invisible in a house full of people. She never complained, not once, because every single thing she did for one reason. Her daughter Lily, 3 years old, tiny, curious, with a laugh that somehow made the whole kitchen feel warmer. Lily spent her days tucked quietly in the corner of whatever room Rosa was working in, sitting on a small folded blanket, playing with a worn, stuffed rabbit she had named Bun, watching her mother work with wide, wondering eyes. Rosa had no other choice. She had no family nearby, no one to watch Lily, and Mr. Harmon, the billionaire who owned the estate, had always been quietly understanding about it. He never complained about seeing Lily in the halls. Sometimes when he passed through the kitchen, he would pause and glance at her with something soft in his expression, something almost like recognition. Rosa had noticed that, but she never asked about it. You don't ask questions like that when you need the job to survive. And everything had been fine, manageable, careful, quiet, until 6 months ago. Until Natalie arrived. Natalie Voss, 28 years old, stunning in the way that only people who know they are stunning can be. Dark blonde hair, sharp green eyes, a smile that could fill a room or cut through one, depending on her mood. She had swept into the Harmon estate like a season change, rest, unavoidable, total. Within 2 months, she was living there. Within 4, she was wearing the ring, the staff. All 5 of them had learned quickly that Natalie had opinions about everything. The flower arrangements, the menu, the temperature of the rooms, the way the towels were folded. But her strongest opinion, the one she made clear almost immediately, was about Lily. "Why is there a child running around this house?" she had asked one evening, barely looking up from her phone. Rosa had been standing right there 10 feet away, hearing every word. "She's quiet," the estate manager, Mr. Patel, had offered carefully. "She never causes any trouble." "That's not the point," Natalie had said. "This is not a daycare." Rosa had lowered her eyes and said nothing. She was good at saying nothing. Have you ever had to stay quiet about something that hurt you deeply, just to protect something you loved even more? If you have, you already understand Rosa better than any words I could give you. But something was about to happen that even Rosa's silence could not protect against. Because that morning, a cold Tuesday in November, Natalie came downstairs earlier than usual, and Lily was in the wrong place at the wrong time. What happened in that hallway lasted less than 2 minutes, but it would echo through that house for the rest of their lives. Started so simply. Lily had woken early. She had padded out of the kitchen in her little socks, the ones with the small ducks on the ankles, and wandered into the main hallway, the way toddlers do when the world is still quiet and they feel safe exploring it. She had found something on the floor near the base of the grand staircase. Button, genie, gold-colored, probably fallen from a jacket or coat. To a 3-year-old, it was a treasure. She crouched down, her tiny fingers closing carefully around it, her face lighting up with the kind of pure joy that only very small children can feel over something the rest of the world would throw away. She stood up straight, turned around, and walked directly into Natalie's path. Natalie had been coming down the staircase in a silk robe, coffee in hand, phone in the other. She stopped 2 steps from the bottom. She looked down at Lily. Lily looked up at her. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Lily did what 3-year-olds do when they find something wonderful and want to share it. She held the button up toward Natalie with both hands, her face open and completely trusting. "Pity," Lily said softly. "Pretty." Something flickered across Natalie's face, something that might have been softness if it had been given a single second longer to grow, but it didn't get that second. "Where is your mother?" Natalie said sharply, not taking the button. Lily lowered her hands slowly. "Where, mother?" Natalie said again, her voice climbing. Lily's bottom lip began to tremble. And that was the moment Rosa came rushing around the corner from the kitchen, apron still in her hands, eyes wide. "Miss Voss, I'm so sorry," she wandered out. "I only turned my back for a moment. This is exactly what I have been talking about." Natalie's voice had gone very cold, very controlled. "This child has no business being in the main areas of this house." "I understand. I'll take her back, right?" "No." Natalie set her coffee cup down on the hallway table with a sharp click. She turned fully to face both of them. Her eyes moved from Rosa to Lily and back again. "I am done having this conversation over and over. This is my home. I did not agree to share it with—" I paused, looked at Lily again, and then said it. "Get out of my house." Her voice cracked through the hallway like something breaking. Lily flinched so hard she dropped the button. It clattered against the marble floor and rolled into the silence. Rosa stepped forward instantly, wrapping both arms around Lily, pulling her small body close, her own face pale and shaking. "Please," Rosa whispered. "She's 3 years old." "She didn't. I don't care how old she is." Natalie's voice was still ice. "Pack your things, both of you. I want you out by tonight." The word tonight landed like a stone in still water. Rosa's arms tightened around Lily. Lily buried her face in her mother's neck and didn't make a sound. She had stopped crying. She had gone very, very still. The way small animals go still when they sense something they don't have words for yet. The button sat abandoned on the floor between them. Nobody moved. And then from somewhere above them, footsteps low and hurried, but getting louder. The footsteps of a man who had been at the top of that staircase long enough to have heard everything. Can you imagine what Rosa was feeling in that moment? Standing there holding her child, heartbreaking, with everything she had built for 4 years suddenly crumbling in front of her. What would you have done? Nobody in that hallway was ready for what came down those stairs. Least of all, Natalie. Ethan Harmon was 32 years old. He had been called many things. Driven, cold, brilliant, unreachable. The kind of man who had built a billion-dollar company before he turned 30 and still sometimes forgot to eat lunch. He was not the warmest person in any room he walked into. He knew that about himself. But he had one quality that very few people who wrote articles about him ever noticed. He paid attention. He noticed things, small things, quiet things. The things that happened in the corners of rooms while everyone else was watching the center. He had noticed Rosa for 4 years, not in any complicated way. Simply he had noticed her. The way she worked, the quiet dignity of it, the fact that she never asked for anything extra, never complained, never made herself a problem for anyone. And he had noticed Lily, those enormous dark eyes, the stuffed rabbit, the way she sat so carefully on her little blanket and never touched anything she wasn't supposed to. The way she sometimes looked up when he passed and gave him a small, uncertain smile, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to smile at him, but couldn't quite stop herself. He had always smiled back. He had never told anyone that. He came down the staircase now without rushing, without raising his voice. His expression was completely unreadable. Natalie turned when she heard him. Her posture shifted, the sharp angles of her anger softening just slightly into something more careful. "Ethan," she said. "I heard," he said quietly. 2 words. That was all. But the way he said them made everyone in the hallway go absolutely still. He reached the bottom of the stairs and stepped onto the marble floor. He walked past Natalie. He walked directly toward Rosa and Lily. He crouched down right there on the marble floor of his own grand hallway. One of the most powerful men in the country crouched down to the level of a 3-year-old girl. Lily peeked out from her mother's neck. "Hey," Ethan said gently, "you dropped something." He picked up the gold button from the floor. He held it out to Lily. Lily stared at him for a long moment. Then very slowly, she reached out and took it from his hand. Her tiny fingers wrapped around it carefully. "Pity," she whispered. "Yeah," he said. "It is." He stood up slowly and turned to face Natalie. The silence in that hallway had weight to it now, heavy and real. "Rosa and Lily are not going anywhere," he said. His voice was still quiet, but there was something underneath it, something firm and immovable, like the foundation under all that marble. Natalie's eyes widened. "Ethan, they are not going anywhere," he said again. "Tonight or any night." Natalie stared at him. Her jaw tightened. "So you're choosing a maid and her child over your own fiancé?" Something moved across Ethan's face then, something complicated and old, like a door opening onto a room nobody had been in for a very long time. "I need you to go upstairs," he said quietly. "I need to speak with Rosa alone." Here is the part nobody in that hallway saw coming. What Ethan said to Rosa next in that empty hallway, voice low, hands clasped in front of him, was not what anyone expected. It was not a speech about kindness, not a promise about job security. It was a question that made Rosa go completely white. And it started with 4 words she had never, in 4 years, expected to hear from his lips. "Why didn't you tell me?" Rosa's breath caught in her throat. Her eyes filled with tears. "Tell you what?" she whispered. But the way she said it, the way her voice shook, the way her arms pulled Lily even tighter, made it clear. She knew exactly what he meant. "Did you feel that? Something is being revealed here, slowly, quietly, and it is going to change everything you think you know about this story. Stay with me." The secret Rosa had been carrying for 3 years was about to come apart at the seams, and neither of them was ready for what it would cost. 4 years ago, before Rosa worked in this house, before the iron gates, before the marble floors, before the folded aprons and the silent mornings, there had been a different life. Brief one, quiet one. A life that lasted only a few months before the world pulled the 2 people in it in completely different directions. Ethan had been 28, not yet a billionaire. Close, but not quite. Still working 16-hour days, still eating takeout alone in empty offices, still searching for something he couldn't name. Rosa had been 27, working as a catering server at events she could never afford to attend. Mark, careful, trying to build a life from scratch after her own family had fallen apart. They had met at a charity gala, not in any dramatic way. They had met in a corridor behind the main hall, both hiding from the crowd for different reasons. They had talked for 2 hours. Really talked. The kind of talking that doesn't happen at galas. The kind that only happens when 2 people accidentally stumble into honesty together. They had seen each other 3 more times after that, and then Ethan's company had exploded. Meetings, investors, travel, pressure from every direction. And Rosa had discovered she was pregnant. She had tried to reach him once, 3 times. The calls had gone to an assistant. The messages had disappeared into the machinery of a life that was moving too fast for anything quiet to survive inside it. She had told herself he knew. She had told herself he had chosen not to respond. She had been wrong. He had never received a single message. She found out much later, too late. She thought that the assistant had been fired for screening personal calls without authorization, that Ethan had never known anyone was trying to reach him. But by then, Lily was already 1 year old.
By then, Rosa had already built a wall around herself and her daughter. Small, solid, necessary. And she didn't know how to take it apart. When she had answered the job posting for the Harmon estate, she had not known it was his house. She had found out on the first day, and she had made a decision, a desperate, terrified, exhausted decision to say nothing. To just do her job, to protect Lily, to survive. She had watched him for 4 years. She had watched him from the edges of rooms in the quiet moments, wondering, always wondering. And she had told herself, he is better off not knowing. Lily is better off this way. This is the right choice. But now, he was standing in front of her, and he had figured it out. Not from anything Rosa had said, not from any document or message. He had figured it out because of Lily's eyes. She has my mother's eyes, he said quietly. His voice cracked slightly on the last word. Just slightly. I noticed it months ago.
I didn't let myself believe it, but I've been looking at those eyes my whole life. Rosa was crying now, silently, tears running straight down her face.
I'm sorry, she whispered. I tried to reach you. I thought...
I know, he said. I know what you thought. He looked down at Lily, who had fallen asleep in Rosa's arms, exhausted from the morning's fear, her small fingers still curled around the gold button. She's mine, he said. It wasn't a question. Rosa closed her eyes. Yes, she said. She's yours. The hallway was completely silent. Somewhere far away upstairs, a door closed. Neither of them moved for a long time. There are moments in life that rewrite everything that came before them. Not loudly, not dramatically, as quietly, completely. Have you ever had a moment like that? A moment where one single word changed the entire shape of your past. What happened in the next 48 hours would test every person in that house and reveal who they truly were.
Natalie came downstairs 2 hours later. She was dressed properly now, hair done, composed, the version of herself she showed the world when she needed to be formidable. She found Ethan in his study, sitting at his desk but not working, just sitting. The way people sit when their mind is somewhere their body can't follow. Tell me it isn't true, she said from the doorway. He looked up at her. She read the answer in his face before he said a single word. Natalie, tell me that woman's child is not yours. The silence was long enough to be its own answer. Natalie laughed, a short, sharp, disbelieving sound. 3 years, Ethan. She worked in this house for 3 years, and you had no idea. Neither did I know she was trying to reach me, he said. I was never told. And you believe her? Yes. Just like that. I've looked at Lily's face for months, he said quietly. I believe her. Natalie pressed her lips together. Something moved through her face, and for just a moment, underneath all the composure and all the armor, there was something that looked almost like grief. Because here was the part of Natalie that the morning screaming had hidden. She had wanted children of her own desperately for years. She had found out 8 months ago, quietly, privately, in a doctor's office she had never told Ethan about, that it might not be possible for her. She had been carrying that alone. She had looked at Lily and seen something she could not name and could not face. And instead of softening, she had hardened. I can't do this, she said finally. Her voice was different now, quieter, more real. I can't live in a house with his child and her mother and pretend that's a normal life. I'm not asking you to pretend anything, Ethan said. Then what are you asking? He was quiet for a moment. I'm asking you to be honest with me, he said about all of it, because I think there's something you haven't told me either. Natalie stiffened. She looked at him for a long time, and then she sat down and she told him about the doctor's office. And Ethan, who had spent the morning discovering he was already a father, sat and listened to his fiancée tell him she had been terrified for 8 months that she would never become one. By the end of it, they were both completely undone. Not angry, not at war, as human, broken open. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most are not evil. They are just people who are carrying something too heavy in silence for too long. Have you ever been angry at someone and then discovered the grief they were hiding? What did that do to your anger? Nobody expected the ending that came? Not Rosa, not Natalie, and least of all, Ethan. 3 weeks passed. They were the quietest 3 weeks the Harmon state had ever known. Natalie had moved out, not in a dramatic storm of bags and accusations, but slowly, thoughtfully, packing her things across several days while she and Ethan talked in long, honest conversations that they had somehow never managed before all of this happened. There were tears. There were apologies given and received. There was the careful, painful work of two people realizing that they had loved each other, but had stopped actually seeing each other somewhere along the way. When she left, she hugged Rosa. It lasted only a second, and it was stiff and uncertain and imperfect, but she did it. And as she was walking out the door, she stopped. She turned back to Lily, who was standing in the hallway in her duck socks, clutching bun, watching with wide, curious eyes. Natalie crouched down slowly. She reached into her coat pocket. She pulled out a small gold button, not the same one, but just like it. Genie, round, warm, from her pocket. She held it out to Lily. Lily looked at it. Then she looked up at Natalie's face. "Pity," Lily said softly. Natalie's face broke just for a second. Something behind her eyes cracked open and let the light in. "Yeah," she whispered. "It is." She stood up and walked out into the gray November morning without looking back. Rosa stood in the doorway and watched her go, and she felt something complicated and surprising. Not satisfaction, not relief, something closer to compassion. Here is the part of the story where I need you to stay with me, because this is not where it ends. In the weeks that followed, Ethan did everything carefully. He didn't rush. He didn't make grand announcements. He sat down with Rosa, really sat down with her, and they talked the way they had talked all those years ago in that corridor behind the gala hall. Honestly, carefully, like two people trying to rebuild something that had fallen apart before either of them understood what it was. He asked about every year he had missed. Rosa told him about Lily's first word, bun. Naturally, about the night she ran a fever and Rosa sat on the bathroom floor, holding her for hours. About the way she laughed. This big, enormous laugh for such a small body when something surprised her. Ethan listened to every single word. He listened like a man who understood that what he was hearing was irreplaceable, like a man who knew he was being handed something rare and had learned, finally, painfully, how quickly rare things could disappear if you weren't paying attention. And then one evening, about a month after everything had changed, something happened that neither of them had planned. Lily climbed into Ethan's lap. Just like that, no ceremony, no announcement. She simply walked across the living room with Bun under one arm, looked at the empty space beside him on the couch, and decided it wasn't where she wanted to sit. She climbed up. She settled herself. She looked up at him with those enormous eyes, her grandmother's eyes, and held up the gold button. "Pity," she said. Ethan looked down at her. Something in his face, something that had been closed and careful and controlled for longer than he could remember. "Oop, completely." "Yeah," he said softly, his voice not quite steady. "The prettiest thing I've ever seen." He put one arm very carefully around her small shoulders, and Lily leaned into him. Just leaned, trustingly, completely, the way only children can trust without conditions, without memory of being hurt, without walls. Rosa, standing in the doorway, pressed her hand over her mouth. She had spent 3 years being invisible, 3 years building a world out of small dignities and silent endurance,
and the daily exhausting work of keeping her daughter safe and loved, in a world that didn't often make that easy.
And now she was standing in a warm house on a November evening, watching her daughter lean against her father for the first time. The gold button sat in Lily's open palm, catching the light shining, in the fullness of what Rosa felt in that moment. The grief of the years lost, and the grace of what had been found, was the kind of thing that doesn't have a name. It's just life. Beautiful, complicated, utterly unpredictable life. Here is what this story reminds me of. The most important things are almost never announced. They don't arrive with ceremony or grandeur or a spotlight finding them in the crowd. They arrive like a 3-year-old in duck socks, holding out a gold button, quietly, trustingly, completely. And the question they always ask without words, without knowing they're asking it, is simply this: do you see me? Rosa spent 4 years hoping someone would see her. Lily spent her whole small life not yet knowing that the world might not always be safe.
And Ethan spent years moving so fast that he almost missed the most important thing he had ever created. A scream in a hallway, a dropped button on a marble floor, a child with her grandmother's eyes. That was all it took to change everything. So here's my question for you today, and I want you to really sit with this one. Who in your life has been waiting quietly, patiently, without saying a word for you to finally stop and see them? Don't take too long to find out. If this story touched your heart, and I really hope it did, please give it a like right now. Takes 1 second and it means everything to this channel. Leave a comment below and tell me what moment hit you the hardest. Was it Lily holding up the button? Was it Natalie crouching down at the door? Was it Rosa watching from the hallway? I want to know. And if you are not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that button so you never miss a story like this one. There are more coming. Stories that will make you feel, make you think, and remind you why it matters to pay attention to the quiet people in the room. I'll see you in the next.